This review is of the full 12-issue run written by Soule and featuring Psylocke, Old Man Logan, Bishop, Archangel, Phantom X, Rogue and Gambit. After the entire controversy about classic characters dumped or rebooted by Marvel in recent years, this was a reassuringly familiar team with some classic villains. If you watch the Legion TV show, you have some of the idea of what a story can do with powerful psychic protagonists and antagonists, and some of the comic book origins used for that show are mined here also. But ultimately, this 12-issue run was one large missed opportunity by Marvel. It does really confirm some of the complaints that have been made about this publishing behemoth producing stories on the cheap, as they could easily have found a handful of quality artists to take the slack when a couple of rotating big hitters could not keep up pumping out pages for this release schedule. That's the melancholic nostalgia inherent with the story. There are some genuinely great pages of art and great narrative beats, but then not so great art really ruined, for me, what was some potentially epic X-Men action. This has some classic villains who themselves gave it a really great potential for psychological depth. Although 12 issues seems plenty, the puppeteer nature of mind games that's possible could have been made more of a slow boil involving the team displaying some facial turn character arcs. Instead, we are told ahead of time they'll be controlled and made to turn on each other. The central problem with the art is I'm hooked from issue 1. Part 1 of Life of X with Jim Chung's pencils, and then pretty deflated just as I should be immersed in the perilous plot several issues in. Marvel advertised this as having a roster of superstar artists, but the disparity between one and another is fairly huge, which I'll show here. After a nice intro from Soule and Chung about psychics, we move straight into a psychic assault on Psylocke. We get inverted white text on black caption boxes narrating the attack and the way the X-Men come to her aid. The reader wonders who this narrator is. We get some interesting use of powers in order to save Psylocke, with Rogue absorbing Psylocke's power and then kissing Bishop so he can blast the energy into the sky. The character interplay works with some variations in heroism, especially with Phantom X, which sets up one of the big plot turns later. Betsy reveals that the attack was from Amal Farouk, the Shadow King, and so we have at the end of the issue this idea of a battle on the astral plane set up with some X-Men left behind to protect the bodies of the astral travellers. We then get this last page glimpse of what will be a slightly ambiguous character in terms of morality, Professor X. Issue 2, and we have some astral light relief with the history of the X-Men as a play performed on a stage. Then more amazing double-page spreads by Mike Deodato Jr. I was pleasantly surprised to see Deodato's appearance here and would have been very happy to see a rotation of Chung, Deodato and a couple of fill-ins. We do have another interesting rotation, and that is with this Shadow King and the Professor behind the scenes sort of mind games, the play within a play of the X-Men seeing through the illusions and the X-Men on the outside protecting the bodies. And although I have previously been a big fan of Deodato's Marvel work, his style is distinctly different here. What I'd previously tried to emulate as the cardiac ink style, as I called it, to reflect the reason he changed in the first place, becomes something fairly strange in which the old solid blacks are exchanged for digital textures. This gets a little bizarre, such as with this panel depicting what should be Bishop talking to Psylocke. The inks get a lot more expressive than I'm used to, but I still liked his panel compositions. So, digital textures aside, Soule achieves an interesting mix of light and dark tones in which he plays with X-Men history, just as the Shadow King and the Professor play their own games. We get one twist in Beast really being Mystique, though I'm not sure how that works astrally, and then a narrative twist in that Charles, on the surface, is stating he wants to win so that he can kill the X-Men mercifully. Issue 3, and we're in fairly safe artistic hands with Ed McGuinness, though I would have preferred the previous two artists for this story. The Professor has a chat with Wolverine, or the future Wolverine, Old Man Logan, in the astral plane, in which he tells his X-Man that the Shadow King is not the same Shadow King of the past, but is somehow stronger. The issue ends with the Shadow King using Old Man Logan's body as a puppet in the material world. Issue 4, with yet another change with Carlos Pacheco on art duties. Again, he's okay, he's solid, but I missed the first two artists. The X-Men are dealing with the Berserker Old Man Logan on the outside, while on the inside there are various fantasies going on. This far into the story, and it's okay just to have some narrative diversions without any major plot points. The only significant thing here is Gambit's apparent succumbing to the Shadow King. Issue 5, and we have Ramon Rosanos on pencils, who is a welcome, solid artist. You have a nice handful of solid artists, which makes the later decisions pretty irritating. Gambit and Old Man Logan are both puppets. I avoided saying that they were both rogue, as that would have been super confusing. Rosanos comes up with some really nice spreads now. And just as Shadow King is stronger, Professor X plays weak. Nothing of huge consequence happens this issue, really. Issue 6, and we now have yet another artist. This one's controversial, as Mike Del Mundo is one of my favourite cover artists. It's just I don't like his interiors. Ironically, his style would suit some of the astral scenes, but 1 minute his digital blurs look fairly sophisticated, and the next you get what looks like incomplete doodles, and the basic grasp of anatomy and panel composition is not really there. Anyway, the X-Men and Professor X fight back in the astral realm. They appear to win, and the Professor frees Old Man Logan and Gambit, but the psychic infection is still spreading. Now we come to possibly my favourite moment in the run. So Charles Soule has set up Phantom X as a bit of a douchebag, and now he allows the ultimate sacrifice. Just as the Shadow King wants to be manifested in the material world, Charles Xavier has found a way back. A vessel, the body of Phantom X. Issue 7, and here is yet another artist, Phil Noto. He's again solid, but you have stylistic vertigo, from the child crony Del Mundo and to this, which lacks the sophistication of a Mike Diodato. So Noto adequately depicts X, as he calls himself, saving the day, at least for a few pages. Here's another example, and I know this is a style, and the finishing is in the inks, but as to complaints about current Marvel, this would not get you into the old Marvel as part of a sample page. So, spoiler, Shadow King's extra strength was by leeching Proteus, and now he's here with us. Issue 8, and clearly they have to deal with Proteus. The fact that the Shadow King is defeated and immediately releases Proteus is made less silly later, but for now we have yet another penciler, Paulo Siqueira. He's again solid, and a return to some tight line work, finished well by Wong and Poggy. The X-Men, led by X, go inside Proteus' psyche, and we have some deeper moral questions on personal freedom. The issue ends with Proteus making his case, but X, in particular, rejecting it, and the two characters, X and Psylocke, being forced into a horrific physical merger. Issue 9, and a new penciler inker, Matteo Bufagni. I actually really like this fairly loose, noirish style. I could easily have read this for the entire run. In the vein of this personal freedom theme, Proteus appears to ask a number of people their permission to manipulate their realities. They are offered any reality they want, but as a good political metaphor, these desired realities can often conflict. Issue 10, and yet another style, with some really impressive artistic compositions by Acco, with inks by David Lorenzo and colours by Rachel Rosenberg. The X-Men fly into the fabricated reality of Proteus, so we now have a fairly long run of issues that is bookended by warped realities of two powerful antagonists. Just look at this spread by Acco or Aco, whatever he's called. We have yet another art team that Marvel could have recruited for more issues here, but we'll see, they didn't. One narrative criticism with now that Proteus has warped reality, the fun and games are fairly similar to the conflict with the Shadow King earlier. There are some fantastic visuals with the colours and compositions, but Proteus seems to get the better of them here. Issue 11, and it gets a little weird. Look at this. Ron Garney with Matt Miller on colours produced this that appears to be a digital representation of a child's felt tip drawing. You've dragged fans along, for 10 issues with solid protagonists and 2 major antagonists, and now you're given this. It's close to the worst submitted pages that would be given to a guest editor at a convention portfolio viewing. And here's some more. very distracting. I just think, for one thing, the ink should be tight on a top-tier X-Men book. Anyway, they, e.g. Mystique, Psylocke and X, pretend to be his mother, Moira McTaggart. That doesn't quite work, so here's a great panel of Rogue flying at Proteus. Doesn't this give you more encouragement to put a few thousand hours more into your pencils and inks, so one day you too can work for Marvel? So Bishop and Rogue pull the same trick as earlier with Psylocke, absorbing and siphoning energy. Proteus' dying declaration mirrors the next story beat. What could have been truly epic looks quite a mess. Shadow King never died, but was parasitically a psychic stowaway all along. Issue 12, and we hope for a return to form, but we get pretty much a Joe Madura imitator in the form of Gerardo Sandoval. It's not terrible, as this spread will show, but I just think it's not the right style for either this type of story, or especially the end of this type of story. The Shadow King makes the X-Men despair, but X, unlike Humpty Dumpty, could entirely put himself together again. He now says he is Charles Xavier, so he's given up saying he's just X. But now the very first page intro into the series on the nature of all the psychics in the world is paid off. Xavier explains to Psylocke that they will harness the power of all the psychics in the world by asking them, which nicely mirrors or inverts both Proteus and the Shadow King as antagonists. It works, though many of them are doubtful the Shadow King's really gone. Xavier now has some gifts for all of them. They will all have regular pencilers in the future, I jest. But no, he decides he's not in fact Xavier, but X again. And he has a dream of a solid regular penciler. But seriously, this was a major missed opportunity, as the combination of Proteus and Professor X inside the Shadow King, with various mirrored desires for reincarnation, could have been a powerful story. Had they restricted the number of artists and done some more character work based on mind warping and reality warping, all of the setups could have been tied up nicely with deep psychological payoffs that were sort of already recognisable to hardcore X-Men fans in the characters they have lived with for decades.